Welcome to another segment of Open House here at Community Media. I will be your guest. I'm Raymond Gowker. And on this show, we bring people in from the community who are doing great things for the community. And today's not different. Today we have an outstanding gem for our culture and our community in June Lloyd. June is here today with us. June is a historian. And June, you have worked as a librarian. I guess, is that where you started your career?
Yeah, I was at a public library in Redline, called Ryder Benfer Library, and my great love has always been history. So I happened to go walk home for lunch one day and was reading the newsletter for the York County History Center, which was then the Historical Society of York County. We're talking back in 1989. And I saw that they needed an assistant librarian and archivist. So I immediately applied and was lucky enough to get the job. And then after I was there for a year, my predecessor left, and I became the librarian and archivist, now known as the Director of Library and Archives at the York County. Then it was the York Historical Society of York County, and later we were York County Heritage Trust, and now it's York County History Center. And I still volunteer and serve on committees, advisory panels and things for the History Center. And I also volunteer one day a week in the library and archives. I have some special projects that I do. And really, any research that I do for my writing, I mean, that's, I'd say 90% at least of my research comes from the York County History Center, because we just have, so luckily York Countyans, which included originally Adams County too, they don't throw anything out. So we're lucky that they donate it, and we have all these, especially like the letters and original manuscripts, diaries. I mean, it just brings the people to life that have formed our history.
It gives you insight that you would not be able to have any other way. So we'll stop here, and just want your attention here a little bit. If you or your relatives may have some artifacts, it could be letters, it could be any collectibles that they don't know what to do with, or they would like to share but keep ownership of, they should consider contacting historic societies like the York County History Center.
Yeah, and most of the time people do donate them, because if you get into loans, would probably only be like for special exhibits or things like that, because it's usually that the ownership is transferred, but then people know they're safe. They're not going to be. I mean, you might be interested. Your children might not be.
Right.
Or your grandchildren. So if they're deposited somewhere like a historical society, then they'll be kept in the proper environment, acid-free folders, and all that kind of thing, as well as climate control. And that they'll be there for not only your family to come back and look at, but also people like me that use those to do research of the time, whether it's the Revolutionary period, the Civil War, the Gilded Age. That information is there and it's accessible.
So you're saying, June, it's a lot better than having it pushed in the backside of your attic.
Exactly. Yeah, attics aren't good.
Yeah. And, I could just imagine you're at the Historic Society, and some people donate things. And as soon as you hear something is being donated, does that get you kind of like curious and anxious?
Oh, definitely. As I say, I volunteer 1 day a week. I usually go in Thursdays, and I'm working on my little special project. But you can't help hear what's going on around you. And just last week, there were at least two things that I kind of perked my ears up, and and then because there's so much interesting history. We've been around for so long in this area, and we just have so much. But so many things come in. Lila Foreman Shaw, who was my assistant librarian and archivist, and unfortunately she's since passed away. We would say that there wasn't a day when we were both, working full time that went by that one of us or both of us didn't find something. Oh, look at this! There's just so much to share.
Uh-huh. And that's part of the thrill and joy of being a historian like yourself. Coming across something.
Exactly.
So I'm just curious. I mean, here you are. You're sitting. Do they give you an area? Do you have a work area there to sit?
Yeah, I do.
So you're sitting there and you're listening to people talking, and all of a sudden, you said there was one or two things that made your ears perk. Can you remember what they were?
Yeah, well, one was a, an early Presbyterian minister. Dr. Robert Cathcart. He served the York Presbyterian Church, which is now First Presbyterian, and also the Hopewell, which was like 15, 16 miles away. And he would travel, in the where he lived in York, and he was very interested in gardening. We have his diaries. He talks mostly about vegetables. Amazing what he grew. But in the late 1700s, early 1800s. But I heard a researcher that I know come in and ask for the diaries that we have. And it was interesting because I wrote a column and still doing a blog post for the York Daily Record, York Sunday News. And I do like once a month, I do a column. And I had done one on Dr. Cathcart and his diaries and the vegetables. Well, just about a week ago, a gentleman from Ireland contacted me. He was a relative of Dr. Cathcart's wife, and he asked if Dr. Cathcart had anything in his diaries about the family. And basically, he has more about vegetables than the family. But this was just a couple days before this researcher came in and asked for those diaries. And then also this Irish correspondent told me about the Family History Society of North Ireland, or something very close to that. Mm-hmm. And when I went on that website, I saw there are it might be helpful with some of my families that came from Northern Ireland, because I'm Pennsylvania German and Scots Irish, like just about everybody around here originally. And not only that, but I've been researching James Smith, our signer of the Declaration of Independence, who is very hard to find anything that isn't a myth, that you can really document. So that gave me another lead to do some more searching, not only for my family, for James Smith. So this all tied together, the Irish researcher, the Historical Society in Ireland, and our researcher who is doing a project on Dr. Cathcart.
And it just...
It does.
Came right... You got to wait for it, huh? Mm-hmm. And they're the moments that you look for. So you loved history for a long time. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that? When was the first time that you or someone noticed that you were asking questions or your attention was drawn to something in the family or history?
Well, most of my families, I always say I'm going to get back to doing some genealogy because I do find it fascinating, but then all these other projects come up. I don't get there. But most of my families came to York County or some of the, like Berks, Lancaster County, before 1800, just about all of them. So, and I have gotten, back that far. So, I was always thought that was interesting. But then, and I was always a reader. So I was one of those kids when I was about 10, I'd go to bed and my parents thought I was sleeping and I thought I was being a little crafty by having a flashlight under the covers. So I always liked to read, and that led me into a lot of history. And then my parents, we would take a Sunday drive to Gettysburg or over to Lancaster County or, just around York County, at the Indian Steps Museum. I just like seeing the places where history happened, and then my husband and I, when our kids were growing up, we could try to do that too, and take my grandchildren. So it's not only do you need to read about it and study it, but it's such a thrill to actually go to those places where the history happened.
And are you imaginative in the sense that at an early age you'd read and you'd put yourself in that time period, or somehow you try to immerse yourself with the experience?
Not so much. I'm too literal-minded, I think.
Okay.
But just finding out about it and just being there, finding out what happened there. I'm very involved with camp security. Our Revolutionary War prisoner of war camp just east of York. I'm on the board there, and I've done a lot of research. I've spent about 10 years going to the National Archives and looking through the microfilm to find pension records for the guards, which I said were both York and Adams County. And now you can see it online. But it was fun going to Washington because I'd take a lunch break and go to one of the museums. So, I've spent a lot of time doing that. And it's really exciting with camp security because after almost 10 years or so of over 10 years, when through a lot of efforts, Carol Tanzola, our president of the board of camp security, she was instrumental in raising the funds, finally raised the funds to preserve, I think we have 163 acres. We knew the stockade was there, and we have been really looking for it for over 10 years. And just a few years ago, on the last day of the dig, because digs are usually run you have to raise money or get a grant to do a dig. And then you do them in the spring, summer, or fall, usually spring or fall when it's not so hot. But on the last day of the dig, I think it was in 2022, finally located the line. You can see the post holes, which was a corner of the stockade. So we've been working on that. Actually, there's a dig going on right now. And so we're looking for the outline, uncover more of the outline of the stockade, as well as some of the other features, the huts, as they called them, which were the little log houses that both the prisoners and the guards would have stayed in. We need to get that uncovered so that we can start doing some walking trails and signage and really interpret and have the public come in and see, because this is, as far as we know, the really last or one of it was one of the few to start with, but most of the sites like that have been built over, and that's what happened here. A developer wanted to put a development on it, and luckily the Carol and the friends were able through private donations and foundations, public agencies to preserve it.
So camp security. This was like a fort?
Yeah, and that's why it was so valuable going to the National Archives and looking at those pension papers, because not too many of them, but some of them did talk about helping to dig the trenches or like cut the posts. They were like 15 feet long posts, and they would dig a trench, and then they would, sharpen the ends of these posts so that they could kind of drive them down, but refill the trench. And that's how the stockade was connected. And they also talked about building the huts, the little like log cabins, we could always call them. There was one of the guards, Andrew Anderson, that talked about not only helping do that, but he and some of his fellow guards, this is when they were just opening it in the summer of 1781, went to the local farmer, and they needed straw to, I guess, to thatch for the roofs of the huts, and so the farmer gave them the straw, but they had to thrash the grain out of it for him first.
Okay, so he
So
got the
yeah,
grain.
and there are just these. I mean, you can have some of these pension papers. Some are like 20 pages. Some can run up to 60 pages. So, but you find these little tidbits, and when you put them all together,
Yeah. So, what are pension papers?
okay, there were the pension applications. The guards at Camp Security for part of the time from where it started and then for quite a few months thereafter, they were the local militia companies. And they would be called, because the militia companies were already formed in what they call classes, which didn't mean the first class was better than fifth class. It was just what they used to call them up. And they said there were a lot from what's now Adams County, because the pension papers, some of them have been lost, but there's a good collection of them. The originals are at the state archives, and then they were in what we call the published Pennsylvania archives, printed years ago. But a volunteer typed those over some years ago, and they're on the Camp Security website, campsecurity.org. So you can actually go do a search and see if one of your ancestors pops up. But now these are what they call the rank and file, the privates mostly, so they didn't get pensions right after the war.
Okay.
It wasn't until 1832 that the Pension Act was passed that included these militia guards. And then the tours of duty at Camp Security were only about 2 months, so they had to cobble some of that together, or perhaps they served in a regular unit because they had to have 6 months to get a pension. But that's what these pension applications are. So these people were 80 years or older, because they had served there in 1771 to 1773. And so they had to live long enough either to get a pension, a cash pension, or they could get a land grant, which would have been in Western Pennsylvania, or maybe even like Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, and I've found some of those too.
So they took the land rather than taking them.
Some of them, if they wanted to go, because that's kind of how the migration was from this area too. As your families grew, there wasn't enough land to support them. So that's how we basically settled the rest of the country from this area. I mean, this is what is known as a cultural hearth.
Cultural
hearth.
Heart. Okay.
Hearth, like a foundation,
Right.
A foundation that people, the families spread out, either down through Hanover and down that way. I think Jim McClure talked about this when you talked to him, or they would go a little further west, like down through the Cumberland Valley, and sometimes they'd keep going down into Virginia, North Carolina, but also they would swing back up into Ohio. Okay. And there are whole towns in Ohio that were settled by people from York and Adams County. Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
It is.
This was sort of like a gateway.
Yeah, it was. And I kind of got off on a tangent there from Camp Security, because then they helped build the stockade and the huts to stay in. Now, the militia guard, then there were some regular units like Colonel Moses Hazen's unit and Colonel Butler's unit that did take over later. But the first quite a few months that it was all local militia guards, the guarding at Camp Security. And that's where they got the prisoners that had been captured at Saratoga in 1777, but they had been marched all over the country because the convention, they were called the convention troops, because it wasn't actually a surrender. The document was like a convention, which meant that it was hammered out between General Gates for the Americans and General Burgoyne for the British. And basically what Gates had agreed to was to allow these, I think at that time, because it was British and Hessians, 4,000 or more, he said that they could go, he agreed that they could go back to England. Well, when Congress got wind of this, they thought, well, wait a minute, if we let these troops all go back to England, that'll free up more British troops. They'll just send those back. They may have promised not to come back, but they'll send more troops back.
Right.
And, we haven't gained anything. So instead, Congress kept finding reasons to keep them here. And first they were outside Boston, the Cambridge area, and then there was a camp in Rutland, Massachusetts, and then they were marched down through here. In fact, a lot of this, especially Hessians, escaped when they were marched, right down through here to Frederick, Maryland, and Charlottesville, Virginia. But then in 1781, when the fighting, more of it came to Virginia, and Congress thought, oh, we better get those prisoners out of there, so we're going to send them to Pennsylvania. And that's when the local military officials were told to find a place, which they did, at Camp Security.
Which is located?
Just east of York, right off of 462, which used to be Route 30, now that we have the bypass.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's our goal is to get it open to the public. Right now, it's part of actually the Springettsbury Park. Springettsbury Township. It's in Springettsbury Township, and they kind of administer it. But the Friends of Camp Security, we do the archaeology. In fact, we're working. We had a nice grant, the best grant we ever had from the National Park Service through their American Battlefields Protection Act.
Okay.
So that's because we need to find more so we can interpret it and get the public in there. Right now, we just every year when we have a dig, we have a day or two where we open it to the public. But it's kind of like off in the middle of a field, the area where we're digging. So we actually have to have them park in a little parking area and shuttle them back and forth.
Okay.
But one of these days.
People can help fund this?
Yes. You can join the Friends of Camp Security. We have our website, campsecurity.org, and we appreciate those memberships and donations because that's what allows us to keep looking. Because not only then did we have we got the British prisoners from that were surrendered at Saratoga. They've been marching around for 4 years. Okay. But finally we're there at Camp Security, and actually Lancaster was the headquarters. That's where the officers were, but they couldn't keep all these people. I mean, there were the Hessians that whose services had been paid their princes. The soldiers themselves didn't get anything. They just got a trip to America. But they were sent then to the Reading area, and the British were sent to like the non-commissioned officers and the rank and file, the privates. They were sent to York, to Camp Security.
And you're saying there was about 4,000.
Well, originally, and I'm terrible in figures, so it might have been more than that. But then as they were lost, some were lost to attrition as they were marched away, because there are stories that they might have even been encouraged by some of the guards that were guarding them as they were doing all this, marching from New England to Virginia and then back up to Pennsylvania. In fact, one of my ancestors, I found out not too long ago, who was a Hessian. He was actually from Brunswick, but they were all kind of those Germans were all classed together. And he escaped, I think it was 1779, when they were marched down here. He escaped, I think it was in December, at Hanover. And he ended up then in the eastern part of York County, for the rest. And he married a local girl. And, he's one of my ancestors.
One of your aunts or uncles, huh?
Yeah, he's a direct, something like fourth great grandfather.
Okay. So this is on 160 acres.
Yeah, that's about what has been preserved. The original farm was over 200, but we do the part that has been returned has the stockade and that's like that. So, but we've been finding more and more about the numbers. I think we use, to be conservative, as far as the British prisoners at camp security, maybe 1,500 or more. And then too, well, they said the Saratoga troops came. And by then, and a lot of them had families with them. They had wives and children. And that was kind of usual for that time, because the women they'd be like the nurses, they'd cook, they'd wash the uniforms, all that kind of thing. And since they had been in the country so long, they weren't that prone to escape. So after they were there not too long, they were allowed to live in like huts outside the stockade, and then the stockade it became filled again with prisoners that were surrendered at Yorktown by General Cornwallis. So, one of the first important battles of the war was Saratoga that we won. One of the last important battles was Yorktown. So Camp Security had prisoners from both of those. And then once the Saratoga prisoners, they were kind of content, and they were allowed to go out, be boarded out to local farmers, craftsmen. So that's why it's so hard to determine the numbers, because there are like returns that tell the ration numbers for the people that were there, but then there were also quite a few other ones that were out in the countryside. As far as the Adams County area, we have some accounts.
So a farmer or a craftsperson could go to whoever was managing the camp safety? No, camp
Security.
And make a deal where they take a prisoner and actually house them and they work for them.
And feed them. So, and that was important, because even though it was really a convoluted system at that time, because technically the British were supposed to be in charge of, even though we had them as prisoners, they were supposed to be in charge of clothing them and feeding them. Well, we ended up, having to feed them most of the time. So that helped. You didn't have to find as many rations for those people. And then actually the Yorktown, after they were here for a few months, they came like January. That battle was in the fall, but by January we were getting Yorktown prisoners too. And after they were here for a while, some of those were bonded out. And there were two types of ways that they could go out in the community. There was the bond, the ones that went out and actually stayed with the farmer, the craftsperson, whatever. It was a bond. I think they had to pay a certain sum, and there was some paperwork. They were bonded out. But then there were passes, and some of those passes were given to actually the women that were there. They not only were doing everyday things and like they said, nursing duties, things like that, but they also were making things like lace and buttons. We found like button blanks.
Oh, great.
And also they were like making spoons, some metal things like that. But the lace, most of the artifacts that were found at the dig are now housed by the State Museum, by Pennsylvania Museum and Historical Society. But in that collection, there are like hundreds of pins, because these pins, which they could have actually created the pins themselves from wire, but the important thing is that they were making lace. And I know I've seen demonstrations like over at Landis Valley, how they do this. They take the string and it ends up with lace. So the women could get passes to go out in the community and sell these things they were making and make a little, extra money.
Money. And at that time, it was sort of like a community. So there was all these different layers of communities being formed. And if your family's following you and you're a prisoner and they're actually trying to do whatever they can so that you, the prisoner, has the best experience you can. Sell things for food, etc. Did this was an opportunity then for the prisoners to establish relationships with the people who bonded them.
Yeah, and some of those, I said some of them escaped actually when they had marched down through here a couple years before on their way to Virginia. But then I think that probably some of them did stay. We don't know the background, but you have the one Louis Miller book there, our folk artist Louis Miller. And actually there is a booklet that put together by Jonathan Stair, who some years ago, who actually is also very active with the Friends at Camp Security. And there are, I think, 24 different portraits, and some of them are in that book too, but what that Louis Miller defined as Hessians.
Okay.
He has under the drawing Ein Hess, so which means a Hessian. And what Jonathan did then was he went and researched each of those people. Each of those persons, and that's really neat if local people can find some of their ancestors there too.
Some of the British soldiers stayed.
Yes, and especially the Hessians, because this area was largely settled by Pennsylvania Germans. So when they went through here, or after the camp dissolved, if they decided to stay, I mean, they were right at home. These were their people. Okay.
Cool. So you studied camp security, but your range. Would you say that you have a specialty?
No, not really. I'm all over the place.
Yeah.
One of my things, I have done a good bit of research on Louis Miller, the folk artist.
And I'll just show this book, and you helped with this book being.
Yeah, Lila Foreman Shaw, who unfortunately has passed away. She was my assistant and then she became the librarian archivist, now the director of archives at what's now the York County History Center. And she and I edited these drawings that hadn't been published before that Louis Miller, our folk artist, put together.
So here's a folk artist, and he's living in York County during 17...
He was born in 1796, and he died in 1882.
82, okay. And he's just doing drawings of people that he runs into.
He was a carpenter by profession. He lived in York. He knew a lot of people. He was friends actually with people that their descendants became some of the prominent families in York County. So, yeah, and he must have had a photographic memory, because there's another book that was published in, I think, 1967, the late 1960s, that has a lot of his drawings. And then, but these are unpublished drawings that Lyle and I put together, and there still are some other sets of unpublished drawings at the York County History Center, and we're coming out with a book. It was put together by Jay Davidson. It's not a children's book, it's a book for all ages, but it's kind of like a picture book, and that'll be coming out in, I think, the fall of 2026. And so I got back into helping kind of edit and look at some of those pictures, because there's just so much. You see all the details, but he illustrates things in, like I said, especially like the earlier book, and also some of the ones that are going to be published in this more of a picture book, of things that happened when he was like 4 years old. But when you look at some of the portraits he did of people that he knew when he was very young, but he did them when he was older, because he seemed to have done, especially like that half of this volume, he did when he was in Virginia. After he retired as being a carpenter, he then moved down to Virginia. His brother who was a physician, had settled many years before in Christiansburg, Virginia, down the Shenandoah Valley. And there was a niece that he went down and stayed with in retirement. And then there's evidence from some of the letters that we have, not too many, but enough to give you some evidence that he actually was creating some of these things and drawings and sending them back to old friends and family members back here, because now he had the time and he had a tremendous memory.
He had to have.
Yeah, I mean, because he covered some of the things that happened when he was a small child. He also did a series of drawings, a series of travel books, and most of those haven't been published. But he went with a couple friends from York, Alexander Small and Henry Hartzog, and in 1840 they went to Europe, and he kind of broke off with them, and he traveled a lot on foot over Germany, especially the region that he was from, and so many of our ancestors here are from. And he did a very detailed travel book, because he could draw. Sometimes you could tell he's just like he wanted to record what this incident, maybe a humorous incident, because he really had a lot of insight into the community. And he would do them in pencil, but a lot of things, some of the things like the European travel books, I think they're mostly done like in pen, and they're very precise. So he's had so many different styles of drawing too. He's just a fascinating person, and he's just so invaluable. To have recorded 19th century life, especially the first half or first 3/4 of the 19th century. His drawings have been used in textbooks and papers, all over the world, because there's just nothing like them.
This is a yearbook.
Yeah,
This
kind
is
of.
like a yearbook, okay?
Yeah.
This is what I'm looking at now. It's like 1800s, 1820. What's the earliest ones?
I don't know, because some things he dated, and that's what we still don't know when he drew what, but we know he was drawing a lot by the time we went to Europe in 1840. But then a lot of the times, I think he was in the 1850s, he retired, and he would visit relatives here, but I think he sold his house and his parents' house. They had houses on, one was on King Street in York, and one was on Duke Street. They were just like a block apart. And then he would spend time with the relatives a lot of the time. In fact, he's buried in Christiansburg, Virginia. Now, they have a few of his drawings at the Historical Society down there, and they're very proud too of Louis Miller. There's also a large collection of drawings, mostly of Virginia, at the Abercrombie Aldrich Rockefeller Museum in Colonial Williamsburg.
So he did more than one yearbook.
Yeah, he did a lot. He drew thousands of drawings. Yeah.
So the people I'm looking at right now actually lived in this area, and we'll try to get some of these images for you to look at a little bit better than me just holding the book. But in this book, like here's old Dobbins. Any relation to the Dobbin house?
You know, I don't know. It well could be.
Yeah.
And another thing, a lot of times in those kind of, full length profiles, most of their profiles, they'll hold the tool of their trade. Someone commented that he drew a lot of butchers. Why was this fascinated with butchers? Well, it's because there were a lot of butchers, because you had to have fresh meat, and you didn't have refrigerators.
Right.
If you had maybe an ice house,
Okay.
but that wasn't easy too. So you had to go buy your fresh meat every couple days.
Right.
But there's one of wallpaper,
The beginning.
or a plaster. I think it was a plaster. And what he's holding is like one of those flat plastering trowels, and he also has a rag, because you'd be
Amping it,
yeah,
smoothing it.
yeah.
And then here's someone who was a drummer. And he actually has drummer.
Okay.
George Shopsky or something like that. I'm not very good at it. And then Joseph Drexler works in wood, 18. And there's a picture of him with a broad axe. So this gives so much insight.
Yeah, and then when you look at these other drawings with the book that was published earlier, there's just, he shows the people doing this. He shows there's one of his drawings could be one of the first representations of a Christmas tree. And there's this little tree, probably decorated with apples and maybe cookies, but the whole family, the mother and the children are sitting around the table. And I can't think of the father's name, but he was identified as a blue dyer. That with the indigo, and the family sitting around the table, and you have this kind of Christmas tree in the picture too. But then he's shown with his vat of cloth, doing the dyeing. So it's just I can't say enough about what a resource that Louis Miller is.
Yeah.
And then my other thing, what I started out with actually started as my thesis subject at Penn State Harrisburg when I was working on my master's degree in American Studies, is the Pennsylvania German Taufschein, the baptismal certificates, also one of the divisions of Fraktur, the colorful Pennsylvania German birth and baptismal certificates that were made for York County area children, which I defined as York, Adams, and Northern Maryland, because those people were all over the place, and we turned that into. I should have brought that along. We turned that into a book, and it was published by the then York County Heritage Trust. And I still am continuing my research on that too, because they are just so, I've done research on the artists. There are like maybe a dozen identifiable artists, and I have a database. And it's amazing how many I've collected over the past 30 years of examples. People share them with me, send me a photograph of a baptismal certificate, the German baptismal certificate that has been passed down from their family. And I'm up well over, I think, 1,200 in my database. Some of them are hand done. I said there were about 12 known artists. Some were quite prolific, like Daniel Peterman. I think I'm up to around 100. Adam Wirtz, who did a lot of his actually in this area. But then a lot were printed. And really the center of printing in the late 1700s, early 1800s was Hanover. As far now, York had printed newspapers, but most of the printers that printed the Taufschein, the baptismal certificates, were in Hanover, and I've done an article or so on those.
And that's 1800s?
Early 1800s.
1800s?
Yeah.
June, you're precious for this area. You are. I mean, this book is phenomenal. I mean, if you look at the people, you can see what people were like. You could see the clothing that they wore. You could see, like you said, things that they're doing or holding. And it gives a nice foundation to someone who wants a feel for who lived in this area. But not only that, with all your research, um, you must have a good handle on the ancestry in this area.
Yeah, well, yeah, mine, and when I run into, especially like with the birth and baptismal certificates, I run into it. Also, the church that I attend, I didn't at St. Luke Lutheran Church in Chancellor Township, and I didn't grow up there. I grew up. It's a little village called New Bridgeville, of which nobody ever heard of, but it was founded in 1772. And I actually grew up going to a Presbyterian church, which is okay because I have Scots-Irish ancestors too, at the Brogue, which is even a smaller little place. And so I know those families. But now, actually, I do attend St. Luke Lutheran Church. And I've been there since 1772. It started out as a union church, as did most of the churches. In fact, I know Jim McClure mentioned a couple times Dr. Charles Gladfelder, and he was invaluable in my research. Not only was he around that I could ask him things, because he would come at least once a week, I think, and to do research at the York County at then the Historical Society of York County when he was at the Adams County Historical Society. But the volumes that were published that he did on the German Reformed and Lutherans, they were published by the Pennsylvania German Society, and they were just invaluable. It's a 2-volume set. But he researched all the early churches, and that I couldn't have done my research on the Pennsylvania German birth and baptismal certificates without the research that he did. But now that I'm active at St. Luke again, actually a friend and I are planning for the 250th to mark, we know of at least 10 Revolutionary War soldiers that are buried in our little church cemetery, where the cemetery isn't so little, the church is little, but the cemetery has been, since it's been around for over 250 years, is fairly large. So we're planning to do that. We know where 3 of them are, including one of my ancestors and one of my husband's ancestors.
And their last names were?
Mine was Keener, and my husband's ancestor was a Tome. So we know where those 2 are because they had legible tombstones. So, like the veterans, they have the markers, and the Veterans Affairs Office supplies the flags every year. But then by working through the cemetery records, and I am on the cemetery board too, and one of our members had put the plots and the people that own them and people that are buried there in a database, which was invaluable because we're pretty well located where the others are. So now we're trying to figure out how to put a stake and a flag and a sign so that we can recognize those veterans, because there's at least 10 at this little country church in Chancery Township.
And in your studies, you found out that this area was very vital and loyal to come together, become a militia, and fight the Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
In fact, there were some of the first troops that went up to Boston, I believe, that I heard from one of your talks. I mean, can you speak on that?
Yeah, well, James Smith and Thomas Hartley, both are pretty well-known patriots. They formed, they were a militia group. Well, actually, they were associators, because associators were volunteers. And then later, under the military, they would become militia. But they formed this company of associators called the York Blues. And we were fortunate enough, when I was the head of the library and archives, that the original muster book of the York Blues came up for sale. And we were fortunate enough to raise enough money to purchase it. We had a rare book dealer who was a friend of ours. I think the auction was in New York, but anyway, we do have that in our collection now. And it tells about forming this company, and then they signed it, and I forget how many hundred. I forget how many, but there you have all the signatures of these people. Some signed in English, some signed in German script. But that's one of our treasures.
That was one of our first militias in this area.
Yes.
Now,
yeah.
before that, they were called associators.
Associators, and that was really formed as a company of associators. But then they became a lot of those people that were in that first in the York Blues Company. Then were part of the troops that marched off to Boston. Just a couple of months. Well, the first shots were fired in late April 1775 in Eccleston and Concord, and then they marched off from July 1st to Boston. Because Boston was under siege, and they went up to help there. They didn't get there in time for the Battle of Bunker Hill, but they were engaged in some skirmishes, and some they did see some action there. And they marched, and it took them I forget, like 2-3 weeks. I mean, it was a long walk.
But they were determined.
Yes.
When they got there, they were anxious to help.
They were, and they were. These were. Well, this was a frontier. These are frontier people. I mean, if you wanted to eat, you were out getting your deer. They were pretty good shots. So they were, so they turned into good soldiers.
They were very good assets. So associators, there's, from my understanding, when the British ruled the area, they didn't let you have a militia, of course.
No.
But they wanted you to have some type of organized force.
Well, I don't know if they did or not. I said this. About as far as the Revolution, I've researched camp security. I've researched James Smith, our signer of the Declaration of Independence. But I'm still learning a lot about the Revolutionary. Those things in general. And they were the committees of correspondence and the committees of safety, and each area had those, and they were the ones that were communicating with all the other people that, all the other, in the other cities, in the other towns, in the other counties, in the other leading up to the Revolutionary War.
Up to that.
Yeah. So I think it kind of, so they knew what was going on. They knew that the port of Boston, after the Tea Party, was being blockaded. In fact, York people actually sent some aid to the people in Boston. So through these committees of correspondence, that's what they were doing. They were writing back and forth. And then the committees of safety, I think, and I'm talking off at the top of my head here, then they, safety, you needed to, coming down the road, you might need people that were organized, as a fighting unit. So then I think that's when they started forming these volunteer associators units, which then later became part of the military system.
So within the towns and communities, there were groups that were corresponding to each other, letting everybody know what was going on, sharing, nurturing opinions, and it really wasn't so hard in the frontier, because I guess the frontier, they were living out hardships. They were, so their experiences created values and opinions day to day. Being on the frontier it wasn't easy, was it?
No, no, because you had, you couldn't just jump in the car and go see the person 20 miles down the road. You had to get on a horse. Okay, yeah. Yes.
Transportation took a while.
Yes, transportation did take a while, but they did get together, and then some of the leading, again, James Smith and Thomas Hartley, and yeah, I may misspeak some dates, but I think it was in 1774 that they were sent to, they were the delegates from this area, and there was a third one, Joseph Donaldson, I think, to a meeting in Philadelphia. And then from that meeting, corresponding with the other committees of correspondence, et cetera, in the other colonies, is when they recommended forming the First Continental Congress. And the First Continental Congress, that's where they started to unite, but they realized that all these colonies, their constitutions pledged allegiance to the king. So one of the recommendations, but they met, I think, from July, I can't think of the dates, to October. I'm not sure, May to October, 1774, but they recommended that there be a Second Continental Congress to meet in 1775. But in the meantime, then the Congresses realized that the states would have to change their constitutions. They'd have to write a new constitution. So James Smith, again, with a couple of the others, patriots from York County, attended the Pennsylvania Provisional Conference, and that was what they did was, and they only met for a week. James Smith and let's see, I think it was Thomas McKean and Benjamin Rush, were actually asked to overnight write a recommendation. So they did. They came back, and this was a Sunday. They met every day. Mm-hmm. And I cover this in the article that I wrote on James Smith for our upcoming Journal of York County Heritage for the York County History Center. Mm-hmm. They did this nice little document that what they recommended was that Pennsylvania was actually declaring themselves independent from the British, and that they recommended that Pennsylvania Constitutional Convention be called so that they could write a new constitution. Mm-hmm. So we're talking now, we're into when we get into 1776, I have my dates. There are so many of them, and so James Smith again. Then he was named as a delegate to the Pennsylvania Constitutional Convention in 1776. And then a couple weeks after that started, he also was named as our delegate to Continental Congress, and that was July. I think the Constitutional Convention started the beginning of July, but he joined Congress then on the 20th of July, 1776. So the Declaration of Independence had already been presented, but basically John Hancock, signed it. But all these other people, including James Smith, then signed it after he became a member of Congress.
Mm-hmm. So he was very instrumental and was relied upon by the officials of Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. To move our independence forward mm-hmm. in a sort of a legal way.
Yeah, and he wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't a lawyer. He was an attorney. Yes, and he then served in Congress. And some of not too many of his letters exist, but we do have some. There's some in our collection, very few at the York County History Center. But Henry Young, who was, the director of the Historical Society back in the 1930s, he collected from all over the country. He collected James Smith's correspondence. That wasn't easy as emailing you a document or even doing a photocopy. Because what he had to have when he located them in these institutions, which wasn't easy to start with, was that they had to make what they call a negative photostat. You've probably seen those.
Okay.
So, he gathered these letters. And so what we do have, we have like a couple dozen letters. And they have been printed in our Journal of York County History that we put out each year. My favorite ones are, I think there's 4 or so, that he wrote then when he was serving in Philadelphia in Congress, and he wrote back to his wife Eleanor in York, and they had 4 children. The oldest ones probably were in their teens because he married fairly late, and he had these. So he was, always he was telling her things about what was going on in Congress. She evidently was interested in that, but he also was, talking about the family. Give his love to the 4 children. So we know some about, we know the most, I think, about his personal life from those letters. But at one time, he actually, because he wasn't, some of the people in Congress were wealthy, some weren't. He was an attorney, so he wasn't, he wasn't poor, but he had to keep working as an attorney. And at one point, he even thought about moving to Philadelphia because he must have been picking up a few cases while he was in Philadelphia. But then he looked at the cost of living, and he told her, "No, I think we should probably stay in York because it would cost more to live here."
So that's very special for our area, York, that we have someone whose signature is on the Declaration of Independence. And did he not read that to the people in York?
Yeah, according to John Adlam, who I think was a teenager at the time, they left some diaries. There again, you go back to the diaries, and a couple, it was. And he could have been in Philadelphia at that time with these other, things with like the Pennsylvania Constitutional Convention. But according to Adlam, that Smith and a couple others came after it was printed, because it was printed up by like July 5th. So in the next day or two, and it would take, if you're riding a horse, you're making a pretty good clip. It would probably take like maybe 2 days. The carriage would take longer. Then when they got to York, he said that evidently the people knew about it, but then the next day, which would still been in the beginning of July, that all the people, and there were mostly like women and older people, because those of fighting age would have not been there, but they gathered in Penn Common, the park, and they had the the militia band, all kinds of, kind of did a little ceremony, and according to Adlam, that it was read, yeah.
And prior to that, he spoke to the people.
Yes, yeah, that's according, again, that's John Adlam, who said he was there,
Okay.
and he said, yeah, that. Yeah.
So another special thing there's many special things about York that we'll talk about. But in this time period, it was the capital for,
Yes.
was it a day or?
No, it was capital for 9 months.
9 months.
Lancaster was capital for the day.
Oh, okay.
But when they got to, because the British was coming into Philadelphia, so Congress was meeting there. I mean, that was the capital. But the British were invading, so they had to leave town. They had to find someplace safe. They did stop in Lancaster for a day, but already the Pennsylvania legislature, because they had to leave Philadelphia too, because Philadelphia was also the capital of Pennsylvania. So they were already there. It was too crowded for one thing, and then the other thing was the powers that be looked at, well, if we could get them across the Susquehanna River, that would be an extra layer of security. And in fact, there is a study, we have a copy of it in our files at the York County History Center, because there were a lot of ferries, And there is actually a military study of the ferries, because they were looking not only, could Lancaster go across, but also they wanted to watch out where the British, if the British decided to come across. So yes, they met in the courthouse in Lancaster from the end of September 1777 till the end of June 1778. And while they were there, the Articles of Confederation, our first Constitution, was adopted in November of 1777. And then that led to another very important, essential piece of our revolutionary history, because once the Articles of Confederation showed that we were an entity, we weren't just these colonies, we were states, we were united. And so then that made it easier for people like Benjamin Franklin, who was in Paris trying to convince the king of France, because we needed help. We couldn't do this all ourselves. I mean, this was Great Britain with their established army. We were here with, our militia companies, So we needed France's help. So what that led to was in May of 1778, when they were still meeting here in New York, was the treaties of alliance and the treaties of amity and commerce that were signed with France. Because frankly, I don't think we could have won the war without France's assistance. They sent, they sent arms, they sent money, they sent generals like, or became generals like Lafayette. So we really needed their help.
Is there anything about the history of York, Adams County, that people don't talk about, that we should spend some time thinking about?
Oh, there are so many things, and that's why it's just fun when these things pop up. So you might be looking through the files of the York County History Center. You're looking for one thing, and then you see this other find. Oh, what's that talking about? And the one thing was Jackson County. If we could actually be sitting now in Jackson County, because there were bills, several of them, presented to the Pennsylvania State Legislature in the 1830s, when Jackson was president, hence the name of the county. And because there was a real movement to carve Jackson County out of part of York County, part of Lancaster County. And if you look at the map, I did a blog post on it. My columns and blogs are on my blog post, which is yorkblog.com/universal. And I know there's probably, well over 1,000 posts on there. And one that I did was because when I was doing my newspaper column, I was also do the post them on the post on Jackson County. And we had this map, like a big piece, like a blueprint size of a hand-drawn map showing Jackson County. So I started doing some research in the volumes, the minutes of the state legislature, et cetera. And it would have stretched like from Spring Grove would have been in it. And so would have New Oxford. It would have gone from Spring Grove to New Oxford and like to Big Mount. So that whole area, a lot of it would follow Conewaga Creek. And the county seat would have been Hanover. And as I say, it was introduced several times in the state legislature. And then there were people that were for it and people were against it. But I know at one point there were quite a few of the leading citizens of Hanover who were for it.
Oh, sure.
Because, so we could not be sitting in Adams County here. We could be sitting in Jackson County.
And Adams County would have been a little bit, it still would be on the other side of New Oxford, going to Gettysburg, etc. I never heard that.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. And you love to write.
Well, I like having written. I think Jim McClure mentioned that too, but that's what I always say. I mean, I love to research. But to get it down, I'm a slow writer. It takes me forever because I kind of like think it out as I go. But then, I'm really pleased when I've written something that I can share, because that's what it's all about. I mean, you can research, but if you keep it to yourself, and I think Jim had addressed this too, that we seem to have a community of people working on local history that are sharing they're not keeping it close to their chest.
No.
If they find something, they say, "Hey, look at this,"
Mm-hmm.
and then this person can kind of go with it.
And that's like something in the community historians that is very popular is to share.
Yeah.
More so now than before.
Yeah, and one thing that I'm glad that they're doing more research on was when the Mifflin House in the Wrightsville area, Jonathan Mifflin, who did serve in the Revolutionary War, but then it was a known station on the Underground Railroad. Jonathan, his wife was Susanna Wright, one of the Wrightsville, Wrights, and they were staunch abolitionists. And it was just a few years ago in danger. It was going to be torn down. It's in the middle of an industrial park, kind of, or at the edge of industrial. But now it has been saved. The Lower Susquehanna Heritage Region is there. It's going to be a museum. But when they were working to save that, I kind of got interested in it. I did some research, and we were lucky to have quite a bit of information on the property itself, including a photo album that someone had donated because her family had used the house in the 1800s as a summer home. So, so I did some research then, but now that the Heritage Region is going to be working on it, and they're doing a lot more. So, I'm excited to see.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to see what they're doing. I'm excited to see what like Scott Mingus does on the Civil War, and all these various historians that have kind of a specialty, but it kind of all ties together.
Okay.
And everyone, is really sharing.
Our youth. Do we have the passion that you have in our youth to
Yeah, there have been. I mean, just recently, there have been younger people. Well, for instance, the Board of Camp Security. We actually have he Ben Workley, who just graduated from York College with a history degree, and he's going on for his master's degree in history. And he did his senior paper on camp security and did a nice display and things. And he's been actually he's on our board now, but he actually he's one of these people that's happy to go to the Library of Congress or Historical Society of Pennsylvania physically to look at the things that haven't been microfilmed, and because that's what you have to do. There's so much more out there, and it's really great that it's all coming online, but it's really exciting to have some of these younger people, and he's just one example. I know there are some teachers that are younger that have started history programs, local history programs in their high schools, and there's a lot of younger people getting. It really makes you hopeful for the future because there's a lot of younger people that are getting involved in history.
So there's some mini-me's like you.
Okay, well, I don't know.
I hope so.
Well, I think they'll find out. They'll find a lot more than I have, but I think they will enjoy it too.
Okay, cool.
Yes, I do.
You've been very, very active in the history. You've helped our community celebrate our culture. Why is it important that we stop and think about what happened in this area?
Well, you learn from history. If you don't, you keep making the same mistakes. Unfortunately, a lot of times the powers that be don't learn from history. But if you really pay attention to what happened, you can go forward instead of just going backward or being stuck in a rut.
Mm-hmm. Good enough. Okay. Is there anything that we should have spoke about and we didn't, June?
I can't think of anything. I've gone off in a couple tangents, but that's what makes it so much fun. There's just so many different periods of time. And since York County has been around since 1749, including Adams County, which became their own county in 1800, there's just so much in this whole area, so much more to explore that
And
just
your
don't know.
county was very instrumental at one point producing food, canning the food, and
Yes.
distributing it to the rest
Yeah,
of the
I
country.
have relatives that worked at canning houses or like canning houses. I've done actually several blog posts and columns about the canning houses. And during World War II, another thing that I've done some research on, there was a woman called Anna Dale Gamble who was very civic minded, very active in New York. And she is known, and I do a program on her. She was one of the leading suffragists in York County in the 19 teens when they were trying to get the state constitutional amendment. It ended up being, being a national thing, but she was the head of the suffrage movement in York County, of the women's suffrage movement. But also, I found in their papers, and she became later in life a board member of the Historical Society of York County. So we have some of her papers and scrapbooks. But one thing I found besides all this suffrage information was during World War I, she was in charge of the Liberty Gardens. I think we called them Victory Gardens in World War II, where they called them Liberty Gardens in World War I. And she had trained people that worked on the railroads, cultivating gardens by the train tracks, besides everybody in their little backyard. Because, during World War I and World War II, if we could feed our people with these gardens, then the crops that were canned could be sent to the troops. So there are just so many things like that. That one thing leads to another. And I also wanted to make sure I mentioned that I was on the advisory panel, so I'm excited, and I'd be excited anyway, that the York County History Center will be opening. I think the public opening is July 3rd. We'll be doing our Revolutionary York exhibit, which is our first changing exhibit in our new museum. If you haven't, anybody that hasn't been to the York County History Center, we moved, it'll soon be 2 years ago, we moved to the steam plant building on Pershing Avenue, and I helped in some of the exhibits there, and really proud of the museum. There's just so much history. But then we're doing this first exhibit that'll be up a couple years, just focusing on York County and the Revolution and as part of America 250. So I hope everybody comes to see that too.
And another thing I found interesting when I was looking through your blogs and your writings and stuff was that you wrote about slavery in this area a little bit.
A little bit. Scott Mingus has done a tremendous job on that. But yeah, it was, when you start looking through those old newspapers, it just kind of hits you when you see that there's an ad for a runaway slave. And you realize then that, well, there were enslaved people here too. It was not a pretty part of our history, but it is part of our history.
It's part of our culture. It's part of our culture. June, thank you so much for coming in. Thanks for your passion that you've had since you were a small girl, and your parents kind of fed that, and as you did to your grandkids. Is there anybody in your family, your grandkids, or your sons or daughters?
Yeah.
Are they like you?
Yeah. I think most of my family they like to go to museums.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you guys play scramble and games like that? History games when you get together? Do you play trivia?
Yeah. We have in the past. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
They're very lucky to have someone like you.
Okay. They
Is there-
don't have a choice, so
don't-
they'll
they
hear
don't.
they'll hear about history whether they want to or
To
not.
not. But my belief is that they chose you.
Okay.
They said, I want to be born in that. I
Thank
think
you.
they chose you. They were very lucky too. Is there anything you'd like to say to the people watching before we leave?
Well, I just thank you for the opportunity. I think this is a great venue to share our history because we have such a rich local history. And with all my years still continuing as a volunteer at the York County History Center, I just hope everybody comes and sees our museums. We have our new museum, we have the Agriculture and Industrial Museum, the Fire Museum. There's just so much history. And also, though not only the York County History Center, but so many of the communities have their own museums like New Oxford, Red Lion, where I lived for many years. If you get involved with those historical societies, you're going to learn a lot about where you live, and it really makes you richer for it. You really have this sense of place. Maybe your ancestors lived there, maybe they came later, maybe you came later, but still it's where you are now. And it's just so exciting to learn about what happened here.
And, hopefully you find a passion in your heart for that.
Yeah.
And it also gives you a reference of who you are. Where you live, sense of community, and then to connect with people that might have the same interests as you, builds the community. And I think a great community is a connected community.
Yes. Yes, and we started out here mostly Pennsylvania Germans and Scots Irish, mostly Protestant. A few Catholics, like the ones that had Conegawaga Chapel was very early, and there was there were some in the town of York. But now we need to embrace everyone else, and some have been here. African Americans have been here since Revolutionary times, and I'm so glad that there's so much more the African American history. The Crispus Attucks just opened their new. I haven't been to it yet. They just opened it very recently in York, brand new museum, and then the Latin community, and and then there's the Asian. There's so many people coming, and it's so nice to see them make their home here. I know one thing, I usually walk up to Central Market at lunchtime when I'm at the History Center. It's only a block and a half away. And there's so many new ethnic food stands. And it's so nice, it's a nice way, it's great food, and it's also a way to share the culture. So I think, we need to welcome everyone, because everyone that's come, whether your ancestors came in 1750 or if they came in 2010 to this area, we're all part of the same community. And it's exciting to see how all those communities are, I think, meshing.
And if you look at the history of our communities, those values are very strong in the values of the Latin community, the Hispanic community, the Asian community, where you have a strong passion for family, and a strong spiritual base, and a knitted community where each other's helping each other move forward.
Yes.
So
it's good to see.
yes, it is. June, if anybody would like to keep up with you, I dare you to try to keep up with June. I dare you. But if they wanted to keep in tune with what you're looking at right now, and and your insights. You do have a blog.
I do, and I haven't, it's been a couple of years since I've done a post. I used to do like several a week, but I've been involved in some of these other projects like Camp Security and James Smith, and I really have been neglecting that. I plan to get back to doing that, and I say it's yorkblog.com/universal, and all my email is on there. My email is ycpa89 at msn.com. And even though I haven't written a blog post for a couple years, from all those years that I did it, 15 years or so, I don't think hardly a week goes by that I don't get an inquiry for somebody, like the gentleman from Ireland that was asking about Reverend Cathcart, because he was doing a search online, and Cathcart came up, and that led to the post that I did. So it's just amazing the people, not only in this area, but you get them from all over the country, well, sometimes from all over the world, and that do have some kind of ties or have some question about our shared history.
And you still do a column?
No, when the newspaper changed hands, and so they don't do those. Well, Jim McClure does, but he's the only one that does a column. I know. I used my late friend Gordon Frerick did one for years, but I'm glad that Jim is still able to do it, because he really, and he also is instrumental in the Retro York Facebook page. And I know there's many thousands, I forget how many thousand of members now on that, and people just jump in and share what they know, or they ask questions about the history of the region, and somebody asks a question, and the next thing you know, there's 50 answers. People have chimed in because, people know things and they're glad to share it.
And you can get online and see your past posts. You can get online and sometimes you can see some of your columns. This is a book that you're very much part of, and you have another one coming out, you're saying?
Yeah, there's one. Now that one I helped edit, but there's a gentleman by the name of Jay Davidson, who is originally from York, lives out of the area now. Put together, it's like a picture book, but it's not a picture book just for children. It's a good introduction to Lewis Miller, and that's going to be coming out soon. Yeah. And that'll be available at the York County History Center. And there's still, I think, some copies of these. I did do the book on the Pennsylvania German birth and baptismal certificates. That's out of print, but I still do have. I bought the last couple cases when it went out of print, because I do a program on the frog tour, York County area frog tour. So I always take, because somebody always wants some. So I do have a few of those left.
Is there a picture of James Smith in this?
There is. Now, he's in as an older man, because we really don't know what James Smith looks like. There's supposedly like 2 portraits that have been used, and they don't look much like each other. But actually, the only authentic ones would be Louis Miller, because Louis Miller was 10 when James Smith died. So he would have been the only person that really saw him. So there is, I think, one in there, and there'll be I think at least one in the Journal of York County History. But he did depict him as an older man. We still don't know what James looked like as he would have been when he signed the Declaration of Independence. But Lewis Miller is the only person that we know of that actually did draw someone that did see James Smith, and he actually lived only like around the corner. From
Saw him often.
Yes, he would have seen him often.
I mean, there's a big debate here in the New Oxford area that James Smith looks a lot like Bob Wilson from the New Oxford Historic Society. That's my vote, and that's how I'm going. So, June, thanks a lot.
Well, thank you for having me.
And thanks a lot for working with the New Oxford Historic Society and community media and celebrating the 250th anniversary. There's a number of different productions that's been rolling for the last couple months, and I think Um, the community will be proud of the efforts that everybody's putting forth,
Yes.
and thanks for being
Great
part of that.
program. Well, thank you. Thank you for doing all this.
Okay. Thanks for watching this segment of Open House here at Community Media. And until we have time to bring another awesome individual like June Lloyd into the studio so you can enjoy their passion, stay healthy, and remember, you are the best.